Welcome back to Total Freedom Radio, the show that's all about raising the bar of knowledge, healing hurting people, and spiritual warfare. And if you were here last week, you were listening to me have a conversation with my good friend Sharon Phipps, and we were talking about the monsters in your life. And we're going to shift gears a little bit for this program. We are going to talk about um the whole nation right now is talking about the Kirk assassination and his wife Erica's beautiful speech, well, several of them in fact. And so we're going to call this show, Can You Forgive Your Shooter? And Sharon, I particularly want to know what your opinion is on this if you want to answer that question.
Sure. I We've been talking about being out of our narcissistic relationships. You have a person, a narcissist that you're in a relationship with. You come out, you're trying to heal. You can become one of those rough people, rough, tumble, trying to fend yourself, trying to find your footing again, trying to figure out who you are. And then you have someone like Charlie Kirk. He takes on a lot of these people that we would ruffle feathers against. And his wife, Erica, during the funeral, it was very touching, did forgive the shooter, just straight out said, I forgive you. I studied to be a missionary, and one of my favorite books was titled Before We Kill and Eat You. And I do know that a lot of times where there is martyr, there is revival. And sometimes when you escape one of these relationships, you have been martyred. You have been destroyed. You just have nothing left. You don't even have a concept of who you are. I remember going on a 2-3 year search with my I date a gentleman named David. That David and I went out almost every Friday night trying to figure out what I like on my pizza. How could I be? At the time I was in my 40s and I didn't even know what I like on my pizza because nobody ever asked me. And you have things in your life that are incomplete because the abuse keeps you at an immaturity. Other people know the answers to certain things, but you don't. Do I like the color red? Do I like the color blue? Which color do I like better? I mean, because your narcissistic abuser's always and they're making you and them the same person. So whatever's in their head is the only thing that exists. You don't get to have your own identity. It's called enmeshment. They enmesh you to them, and they mold you into one person. I remember my ex always saying all the time, you know Sharon and I just think. And I thought, you've never asked me about that in your whole life. How do you know what I think? You've never asked me. And he's not going to.
What was
He's
that you
never going
used
to
to
ask.
always say? I am he is me. What say it?
Yeah, yeah. That he is him, we as a couple are him, and I am him.
Yeah, that's
He
that's
would
pretty
he
much
would
it.
so he would so enmesh me to him to the point that I didn't exist. And then when you break up with a narcissist, whether it's through divorce or whatever, when it's finally over, whether they discarded you or you left and were discarded, because it always ends up with a discard of some kind at some point or another. Um, the one person's left with stripped of all identity because they stole your identity, and they pretended to be you in a sense too. And so then they go out with another person. He goes out with another girl, but he is just like, for him, changing his clothes.
Yes.
Because now he is him, she is him, and those two people are still him. And I used to know that my husband did not love me, you know, and it was kind of weird being married for 20 years. But I also seemed on some level to understand that he didn't know what love was. And I know he's easy to forgive in a lot of ways because I know he tried. He wanted to, he tried to, but absolutely no understanding of what love is. Just, he cannot, not because of the flaw in me, but because of his lack of understanding. And that was very deliberating. Charlie Kirk was murdered by a kid, a very lost kid. The child is somebody Charlie Kirk and Erica were trying to reach, trying to add to the quality of their life. They weren't just out there arguing with people for the sake of arguing. They were trying to increase the quality of their life. And
Well, and raise the
uh,
bar of knowledge. They were trying to add another, think of a row of things you average. You're gonna get the same answer every time if you don't introduce more numbers to average. So he was trying to introduce more information so their average thought could raise.
yes, he was ministering to people whose
Yes.
natural inclination is to hate him. You know, you
That's
don't
hard.
shoot people if you don't hate them. The shooter had to have malice in his heart for whatever, or he wouldn't have done it. And I am divorced. I have 4 children. We are from 2009 is when I got divorced. So kick it on out. We are way out now. And some of you are in the middle of your divorce. Some of you are in the middle of the realization that I'm in a relationship with a narcissist, whether it be a male or a female, or like I said, oh my goodness, you have a parent that's a narcissist. Some of you, the light bulb is just going on. And now I am grandma. I'm an old woman and I'm embracing it. I'm enjoying it. I love getting older and older and older because it's better than when I was younger. These days have got to be better than when I was married to a narcissist. Just is. So, even my worst day is better than my worst day back then, you know? So, uh, we are in uh, a time of healing, yes, but to not be receiving the abuse on a daily basis is wonderful. But I don't know how you get out of one of these relationships with children and still have all of your children intact. And we've talked about this many times that the loving parent says, you're over the age of 18 now, you're an adult, your mom and dad are divorced. You can have a relationship with your mom and you can have a relationship with your dad. You can go out for breakfast with me. You can go out for lunch with him. As long as I don't have to go out for lunch with him and he's not coming to breakfast with me, we're good. About the only thing that I've struggled with is a wedding. And I have decided that I just don't want to sit in the same row. Here comes the bride.
You know my
I
stance on that.
Can I be on the other side of the church? I don't need to have the front row honored seat. Just put me somewhere in the third row on the opposite side. I'm fine. My girls are like, oh, I think we can do that because they've not married yet. But it's like, the only thing I want is not to have to sit at the table with him for the reception because it's just too much room for drama. It does not have to do with anything about forgiveness. Doesn't have to do with malice in my heart. If you have somebody whose intent is to abuse you, why stand in the same space with them when you can just sit in a different row or at a different table? Or I have had an event that my son had, and he's in his 30s, and I said I would go. His dad said he would go, and when his dad showed up, I went to the bathroom. Just, he can't follow me to the bathroom. And my grandkids all needed to go to the bathroom. They were potty training at the time. And I just thought, oh, he wants to come up and do the family thing. Now's a good time to take the potty trainers to the bathroom. And, that's going to take a good 20 minutes. And when I came out, he was gone and did his thing. But I mean, there's no reason. I mean, it was helpful. I took the potty trainers to the bathroom. I didn't have to entertain him. I didn't have to make small talk with him. And it does not have to do with anything with forgiveness. And we talked about that, about not being a difficult person, not being one of those monsters. Just giving yourself space from your abuser is more than enough. You don't have to fight with everybody all the time. And Charlie Kirk had an abuser that day. He got shot. And can you forgive your abuser? And Christians need to let go and forgive. But that does not demand reconciliation.
Well, and
And
and one of the things that I've had said to me too, way back in the day is if you're in a corral with a mad bull, at some point you got to get out of the corral with the mad bull, or you're going to be trampled. And maybe you've been trampled 17 times. You got to get out before they kill you. But once you're on the outside, do you hate the bull? That's the bull's nature. But getting out and forgiving the bull is not the same thing as being willing to get back in the corral with the bull And so much of
Mhm.
society seems to be that if you're not willing to get back in that corral with the bull, you're unforgiving. And I've struggled with that concept trying to discuss it with people. It's like one of the things they used to tell you know,
It
they push your last button and right, they've done it all day. They push that last button in front of other people. All other people see is him going, well, you're coming unglued." But I tell him, if
it
let me ask you something. If I'm standing behind you and I poke you with a sharp stick, what do you do? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. But now I do it again. By about the 5th time, I'm doing it on purpose. I'm not sorry. What is the look on your face? What are you saying? Now you're 25 years down the road, you've got hamburger on your back. You're being
Mhm.
poked. Do you want to keep doing that? So what do you say to the people that maybe feel like you weren't necessarily forgiving because they truly don't understand the situation? And what I love that Erica Kirk forgave the shooter
I think it's
because I think
appropriate.
forgiveness is Christian. I think it's the right thing to do, but it's not the same thing as justice too. It has to be separated.
Correct. So, I've said this to we've talked about these topics a lot, when Jesus was hanging on the cross,
Mm,
one of the people next to him cursed him, the other person repented, and he said to that person, "You will be in heaven with me tonight." But you'll notice God didn't take him off the cross, restore him back, and he didn't live for eternity here on earth. He didn't, you have the apostle Paul. Now, in my book, Saul, before he was Paul, he killed a lot of people.
he did.
Killed a lot of people because they were converting to Christianity from Judaism, and he killed them. And he killed them grossly. I would have just given him up for lost. But God chose other. And he did have his restoration in a sense that he became one of the apostle. He wrote most of the New Testament. Um, but he did have his ministry among the Gentile. It took on a different shape. He didn't have a ministry among other Jewish Christians. He ministered mostly among the Gentile. And a lot of that may have had to do with the fact that a lot of Jews just didn't want to be in the same room with him.
I hadn't
A
thought
lot
about
of
that.
Christians.
Good point. Good point.
Yes. So, it is appropriate that Kirk's shooter is forgiven. I have one child who is not doing well. And when I first heard about the shooting, I thought, oh boy, I hope my son was nowhere near that. And then I thought, oh, he doesn't like guns. So no, he wasn't. But in my mind, I know that my son was probably possibly supportive of that, and I think that forgiving the shooter was also a ministry to his parents, you know. I have one child who's just wayward, and there's disgraceful things,
Mhm.
that make me uncomfortable that are done or said, or, and in order to have healing, though, you really do have to forgive. And I think that one of the last steps of healing from a narcissistic abuse is the fact that there is true forgiveness. And I've written about it too, where it
Yes.
doesn't mean that you don't want justice. It doesn't mean that there won't be justice. It just means that you're not that emotional fireball of hate and frustration, and you really need to let that go. Jesus has forgiven me of so much, and I have children with perceived offenses and real offenses because it's some of the things I'm accused of. Darn it, I did do that. I should apologize, and some of the, because I'm a feisty person. Mom, you did this or you said that. Oh, yeah, well, I got feisty on you. Maybe I did, and maybe I came off harder than I wanted to. Maybe I did do something, but it was perceived far worse than what was in my heart. But we're talking about having relationships with your children, and that's tough because in this battle with the narcissist of trying to find your identity and not be enmeshed anymore and to have an opinion and to know what you like on your pizza, you run over people's toes. When you find your voice, a lot of times you find it stronger, maybe for the lack of 20 years of not having one. So now you're standing up on the mountains and you're screaming your head off, and nobody really cares what you're saying, but there's healing and screaming your head off. So there you are, just blah, 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 so,
Well, and I think
so
there's this misconception too. Okay, you couldn't live with this person because it was a landslide all the time. You either stood up and fought every day, or you cowered because you had to do one or the other. There was
yes,
no In
yes,
25 years of marriage, there was not a day that we were on the same page, that he was reasonable and we could work something out and come to an equitable agreement. But for some reason, particularly our children, but other people think, okay, now there's a divorce, we're gonna have an equitable relationship, you're just not married anymore. Well, you couldn't do it in the marriage, how are you gonna do it without it? But Sharon, give me
yes.
just a minute to acknowledge my sponsors, and then I wanna ask you a question. Just one moment. Are you looking for a cozy escape? Visit an English style tea room in downtown Kilgore, Texas, where every bite is a taste of tradition. From delicious sandwiches and scones to the finest teas, we've got something for every craving. Are you planning a special event? Our charming space is perfect for private parties, baby showers, and more. Treat yourself today at the Grand Empress Tea Room, where good food and great memories are made. Tell them Rena sent you. Folks, don't forget to check out my new book series, Prepare for the End. Just go to rinalynn.com and click on any book cover, and it'll take you straight to Amazon. You can get them in paperback or ebooks. If you like good love stories, drama, espionage, crime, struggling people who've lost their way and need help from those around them, it has it all. It's a classic saga of good versus evil, chock full of visits from the angelic realm from players on both sides. We have two groups of families that have been at war for over a century in Central Texas, and those that serve the dark side are fueled by the Serpent King, who is determined to take out God's men and women before they can stop the evil he leads his followers to do. Each side is determined to represent their God well, and as in Old Testament times, sometimes Jesus himself makes an appearance to speak to his faithful followers and call them to task for end time events. People shockingly change sides, and it's a race to see who will make it through to stand before God and hear, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." Go to rinalynn.com and help me get God's word out through my characters and their struggles to understand why they're so attacked. Send the link to your friends and help me be successful at the task that God's given me. While you're there, leave a donation to help with publishing and radio costs. A good way to do that is with a one time donation, but also you can set up a small monthly recurring donation that I can count on to make sure I can keep the new books coming. Sometimes they're delayed while I save the funds. You can also click into rena-thatinsurancechick.com and send me a contact form, and I'll get you an insurance quote. I have an A+ accredited Better Business Bureau rating, and everyone needs the products I offer. Drop me an email and share your story or your job. It helps me get. Oops, hit the wrong button. That is not uncommon. Sharon, I do want to say something that you mentioned about Apostle Paul earlier, and I love that story and that theme too. And one of the characters that I have in my book is a doctor, and they're talking about this situation. They're so attacked all the time. They're talking about forgiveness. They're talking about what they want to do, and one of the stories that he tells us his friends is that early on in his doctoring, he's having a really hard time because in one room he's got the battered wife. And in the room across from it, he has the husband who did the battering. And as a young doctor and his anger and seeing what the wife and the children are going through, I think he had murdered the children and he battered the wife, and he's in there and he's got to take care of both of them and give his best. And he said, I honestly wanted to let him die. And he said, I was going to. And the Lord just put his thumb in my back and made me take care of him. And he said, and I did it with a hard heart. But he found out later that in prison, this man got saved, and they literally had to keep moving him from block to block to block because he began to preach and people would get saved. But he said, I learned my lesson that I have to be a doctor and do what God called me to do, and he's got to deal with everybody after that. And that's kind
Mhm.
of what I've tried to adopt in my life is too. There's people I can't be around anymore and people that I'm not going to put up with that abuse anymore. But I have to, I'm the forgiver as well, but sometimes it's very difficult. But I have to learn that, their story's not over either. So to you, what is true forgiveness, and how is that different from no contact, maybe wanting justice. How does it fit together?
The forgiveness, there's steps to forgiveness, right? When, especially when you're talking about Christianity, that Jesus came, he died on the cross, he rose again, he shed his blood, and by his blood our sins are forgiven. So you can say, "Dear Lord Jesus, forgive me of my sins," and he does. And then he you through the Holy Spirit coming into your heart and your life, you start a relationship. You can pray, you can reach out to God in your thoughts, in your heart, in your prayers, in your quiet time, and you feel him, you hear him, you know his voice. There is reconciliation. That's true. That's the ultimate forgiveness. But when you're dealing with somebody who is, Rena has done a lot of lessons on how Satan is the ultimate narcissist, right? You've done some great teachings on that. I'm encouraging your audience to click on your favorite place, whether it be YouTube or Spotify. Is that one of them? Go on to any of these places, go back and listen to some of those. I like to re-listen to some of those when I'm working at night in the wee hours. When you're dealing with someone who's bent on destroying you, you can't have quiet times, quiet conversations, that warm, touchy feelings of you forgave me, I forgive you. You are going to put yourself in harm's way. You can't. So you are left with going through the same steps of forgiving someone are very similar to mourning a loss.
Mm.
For those of you who have lost a pet, your favorite pet, your cat or your dog has passed away, or your horse, and or you've lost a friend or a family member, you go through steps of grieving where you are very angry. You'll even be angry at God, and there's really no reason to be angry at God, but your dog died, so you're taking it out on God. And you if you Google the steps of grieving out there on the internet world, usually 7 steps always come back that psychologists go with. And forgiving a narcissistic person, your shooter, the person who has destroyed your life, destroyed your family, your dreams, your wealth, your job, your some of you are dealing with a narcissistic boss. They've destroyed your career, they've destroyed your reputation. It's always the same patterns of destruction depending on who it is that's doing it.
Well,
You
your
know,
daily peace. They always
yes,
destroy your daily peace.
your chaos, your family, everything. They're your shooter. Man, they
Yeah.
shot you. They've destroyed you. Um, how do you forgive that? How do even when you get to the going through the 7 steps, there will be no reconciliation. There should not be reconciliation. My ex was a minister, and my worst thoughts, my worst nightmare, my worst dreams, and I would have these dreams that oh my gosh, he got saved. I mean, really saved. And he took on a new wife, and now she's got everything that I wanted, everything. My kids love her more than they love me, and I'm over here cast out and excuse me, in this destructive world, this world that I don't want to be in, but it's my life now. I can only move forward from this point. I can't go back, can't fix anything. I really don't want reconciliation, and I would wake up in this panic on how would I handle all of that. And I've gotten to a place now where I think I'd be okay with it. Whatever the Lord wants to do in his life, I know would be good for him and would be good for the children. But I just don't see that that's going to be happening. But I would have these dreams, this imagination. That was my worst nightmare that got my heart palpitating. you know um if Charlie Kirk's shooter got saved, I think there would still be justice. you know um I think he's still looking at a court system that has requested the death penalty. I may not be up on all that as much as I should be. There's still the man who hung next to Jesus on the cross. He still died on the cross, and he did go to heaven. But think we really need to trust God to take care of all of that. If
Yeah.
so, if somebody gets saved, and like the Apostle Paul, not only did Saul, the killer of Christian Jews, get saved, he got to be an apostle. That, I don't know, gonna have to let God do what he does.
And
You know
write
what I'm
half the New
saying?
Testament.
Yes. And where would we be without that? And he died a martyr's death. Maybe there was some justice there, you
Yeah.
know, that that to family members who were around, you know. Um um yeah, there's not going to be reconciliation. My marriage, I don't really want it put back together, because how would you even trust that? And things would trigger you, and a whole nother level of things you'd have to deal with. So there has to be a letting go. So instead of reconciliation, it just has to be released.
Yeah. I agree.
God's just going to have to do what he wants to do. If he turns my ex-husband into the Apostle Paul like relationship, I guess that's God's God,
I remember you
and
wrote a paper years ago, and one of the things that you said, and I pulled it up, but we haven't gotten to it, and we got less than a minute and a half. But is that the purpose of reconciliation is to restore a relationship? But in a narcissistic relationship, when you've gotten out of this, there would, just like you're saying, there shouldn't be a restoration. So you do have
no.
to let go. It's not the same thing as biblical forgiveness because there won't be a relationship restored. Sharon, we got a little over a minute. Just tell us what you
Yes.
think we need to know.
What do we need to know? I think that forgiveness, for those of you who heard Charlie Kirk's wife forgive her shooter, and you have a narcissist destroyer in your life, I'm not saying to restore the relationship. I'm not saying to even be in the same room with a person. I'm saying just release it out there to the universe. Don't bring it around in your heart, because I think unforgiveness is one of the main things that leads to you being a terrible person.
I
For your
agree with that.
own
I
sake.
agree with that.
For your own sake, if you don't want to be a narcissist, if you don't want to be a hater, you want to be a lover of people and to love Jesus, and God will forgive you as you forgive. You just got to let it go. And I am so glad that my one child, my son, my lost son, was nowhere near the Charlie Kirk thing when it happened. I'm just so grateful, but I pray for him, and I don't want just him. I want all of those like him to love Jesus. And
I'm
I
sorry, we are out of time on the Total Freedom Radio Show. Go to Rumble, YouTube, or Brighteon and like, subscribe, and share, and drop a donation if you want to support this show. Thank you, Sharon, so much for coming on the Total Freedom Radio Show. We just so appreciate having you all the time.
thank you.